Hello everyone and welcome back to Video Editing 1 with Professor Harris. Today we're going through Lesson 6, Trimming Narrative Sequences. So as you review your rough cut, you'll spot moments that drag on or need more emphasis. You'll also start to work out how to strengthen the cut's overall pacing and rhythm. This leads into the next editing phase, which is refining the sequence, more specifically, trimming. In this lesson, you'll gain a deeper understanding of Media Composer's trim tools. By the end, you'll know how to mold a dialogue scene into a memorable viewing experience. Plus, you'll have the tools and the workflow to handle and refine any sequence in any genre. Let's look at some of the goals for this lesson. Our goals are to become proficient in the trim mode and trim workflow, identify the correct issues at cut points, enhance rhythm and pacing, create seamless edits, trim dynamically, maintain sync, and fine-tune segment content and positioning. Let's get into it. Approaching the trimming phase. Trimming is one of the most powerful storytelling phases in film and television post-production. It's where the real work actually begins. Media Composer includes a powerful set of trim tools, so powerful that they're known across the industry for their precision, fluidity, and intuitive operation. You got a tiny taste of these tools during the MC110 course. In this course, you'll explore the trim workflow and associated tools so you can energize a dual conversation, increase intention between characters, or maximize poignant moments of impact. In other words, you're going to mold a good sequence into a memorable one. As you start to refine a narrative sequence, you'll find each one shares common trimming needs, regardless of the genre. Whether a scene features a scripted dialogue, or an interview, or an investigative report, you'll pace the sequence for appropriate emotional impact, create clean audio edits. This includes excluding clicks, pops, extraneous sounds, or partial words. You're going to want to maintain sync, and you're going to fix visual continuity issues. You may have addressed these while refining the Rock Climber project during the MC101 course. You'll definitely do so while trimming the scripted scene you built in Lesson 5 if you followed the exercises that are in the book. So, if you're ready to find out how, let's go. Here are some technique / tips that Avid has. So for trimming a dialogue scene, that is. Overall, this course covers how to use tools and features, not storytelling techniques. We don't have time to cover all the genres and tips, but we can get you started by offering a few pacing and rhythm tips. Number 1, overall, keep dialogue scenes tight with few frames following the character's line. Why? Because dialogue scenes can slow down a film if not kept tight. Therefore, hold on to an actor only as long as necessary to deliver the lines or react. Trimming away the extra frames will speed up the scene's pace and avoid showing an actor waiting to act. Number 2, at a pivotal moment, hold a shot for dramatic impact. Have you heard a song where the music stops abruptly or for a beat or two? It catches your attention because the break in the predictable rhythm, the silence, refocuses your awareness. Same with film. When you allow or create a pause, you can refocus the viewer's attention back on the narrative scene. Number 3, while refining a scene, look for opportunities to eliminate dialogue. A scene that runs too long, even a well-paced one, can bore the audience. As you trim a scene, ask yourself, what words or lines can I leave out without sacrificing the story? And keep in mind that screenwriters often add lines to a script that become redundant as the actor's body language plays out. For example, a physical response can easily replace a line such as okay or sure or anything affirmative. Essentially, you can control the pace by extending or reducing the time between lines at every edit point. In terms of overall rhythm, you can often influence the audience's emotional response with just a few frames at every edit point. And being a screenwriter myself, I can obviously support Avid's statement here. A lot of editors overwrite, so they're adding those unnecessary lines, and that's where the actors really can take it away. And you need to be in tune to what the actors are doing when you are editing. What can you remove from the scene while keeping the pacing and improving the pacing, obviously. All right, let's move on now to establishing a trim workflow. No matter what you're trimming, a narrative scene, ad, news stories, etc., you can follow the same overall workflow. This section introduces this workflow and associated Media Composer features. Upcoming sections dig deeper into individual steps. To perform a trim in Media Composer, we're going to select an edit and enter trim mode. We can press the trim mode button in the timeline palette or the U key on our keyboard. So I can move my position indicator, my playhead here, and I can press U on my keyboard, and it's going to snap automatically to that trim position. We could also use the go to previous trim or go to next trim, the A and S keys on our keyboard by default. So I could be hitting A and S here, and it's going to jump between different trims. We could also lasso edit a point to activate specific tracks. So I could just whomp, and we're gonna get into trim mode again that way. Okay, we can preview the edit and playback loop, or with the space bar. So if I hit space bar here, it's not gonna work because I'm currently recording here. But you would hit space bar and it could play this trim that we've got set up here. We could select the side or which side of the clip that we're trying to trim. So if we wanted to trim the A side, which is the outgoing on the left, we could click the left monitor or press P on our keyboard. So if I hit P, we can see I switched to the overwrite edit, and now I'm on the left side. I'm on the A side. If I wanted to go to the B side, the incoming, I could click on the right monitor, or I could press the right bracket on my keyboard. Now we can see it switched to the right side. And if I wanted to trim both with the dual roller trim, which is always the default, I could click between the monitors, or I could press the left bracket on my keyboard, and that's going to select both, and it's going to turn pink. If we want to determine the direction, forward or backward, we could perform the trim by using the trim buttons or keys. So we could either use these buttons here, which trims things forward and backward in increments of 8 frames or 10 frames, or 1 frame at a time, either directions, or 8 frames or 10 frames forward or backward, depending on if you have a 24 FPS or 30 FPS project. Additionally, these 3 keys here I can also use on my keyboard, and that would be M, comma, period, and slash. And those 4 keys on my keyboard are the trim keys. We could also do a numeric entry if we wanted, or we could use the JKL and we could trim that way. So those are the keys. We can review and adjust, and when satisfied, we can exit the trim mode. So let's say I wanted to adjust this shot. So I have on the left, I have my outgoing shot, and on the right, I have my incoming shot. She does this thing where she kind of meanders around, and then she takes a step to the left, and I have it so that on the right frame, when she takes that left step, she kind of slides into shot. So I'm going to put it right here because she's still in motion in both shots. Now if I scrub through, because I can't play, I'm going to see she takes that step to the left, and we see her still drifting to the left slightly in this shot. So that's refining my sequence with the frame by frame using the M, comma, period, and slash key. If I hit U, I can go back to trim mode, right back on that edit. And I was performing a dual roller edit just then. So it was moving the cut point on both clips. All right. With practice, this workflow will become second nature, just like building muscle memory in sports. Quick note here from Avid. Since this course emphasizes tips and techniques for boosting editing speed and efficiency, this lesson skips trimming in the timeline with the ripple and overwrite tools. That said, you can use that method to fulfill the trim workflow as well. So I could go to my left bracket. I could use the overwrite trim. I could use my ripple trim. I have all kinds of options. So these still exist. These options still exist. If I wanted to slide these around with my keys, I could still do that as well. So all these functions still work with the ripple and overwrite trims. Okay. If you're just starting to develop your trimming muscle memory, we suggest you work through your sequence multiple times. That way, with each pass, you'll focus on separate trim types. This includes the radio edit for ripple. We could do this with ripple trims, so we could ignore the video and listen for opportunities to improve pacing and fix issues like extraneous sounds, cut off words, or partial words, etc. So that would be performing our radio edit. We could do split edit with the dual roller trim. We'll focus on the video to fix continuity issues, smooth out cuts, and maximize reactions. We could use the slip and slide additional trim functions to adjust and perfect a cutaway's content and timeline position. All right. Breaking these trims into separate passes can help you better understand which trim type to use to fix issues, improving pacing and smoothing out cuts and content, especially if your attempts at trimming have produced mixed results in the past. Once you solidify this, you can start to complete these trims at one time. For example, you might remove an extraneous sound and then create a split edit to smooth out the video cut before moving on to the next cut in a scene. Let's take a closer look at each trim pass and how to execute each workflow. So consider bookmarking this section. If you have the bookmark this section, it's going to be good for you to figure out. You're going to do multiple pass throughs. You might as well be familiarizing yourself with what those are. And this is lesson 6, by the way. All right. So reviewing trim mode and keyboard functions. The outline trim workflow uses trim mode and encourages using the keyboard to speed up the technical process. In case it's been a while since you've experienced the trim mode and the trimming with the keyboards, let's run through a couple of self-tests to review each. So we're going to refer to this image from the book, and I'm going to go through this list and let's see how you fare. Or let's see if you can at least try and identify these before I say something about them. So we have the A-side monitor. This shows the last frame of our outgoing shot, which is our A-side monitor. This is our A-side monitor. So we have the shot that we're trimming here, and it's the last frame of this 3B shot before it transitions to this 3-3 shot. This is the last frame. The B-side monitor, which is over here, this shows the first frame of our incoming shot. So that is the 3-3. So we have our outgoing shot, which is 1, and our incoming shot, which is 2. Next we have, number 3, we have the pre-roll / post-roll durations. So this displays the preview durations included when you click the play loop button or spacebar, for example, a 2.5 seconds before and after the cut point, or 5 total seconds. So we know exactly how that looks now. We have our pre and our post-roll durations. Number 4, we have our trim buttons. This performs a trim. We have our left and right arrow trims, which do 1 frame at a time. I just talked about this. Or our double arrow nose trim, 1/3 a second increments. So that would be 8 to 10 frames, like I talked about. And then we have the trim counters, number 5. Trim counters display the duration and number of frames you trimmed on each side of the edit. That's the A side, which is the left side, and the B side. Negative numbers mean that you trim to the left, while positive numbers mean that you trim to the right. All right, next we have the number 6, which is the play loop button. This plays a loop around the edit point in a single monitor, or press the space bar, or if you press the 5 key or the tilde key on the default keyboard setup. Number 7, we have the trim mode button. This activates and deactivates the trim mode mapped to the U key by default. We know that. Then we have the trim rollers. This indicates the trim type. We have ripple, overwrite, or dual roller. These are our active tracks and sides. So I want to do a quick review here of our dual roller. So right now when it's double pink, and Avid's going to ask you this when you take your specialist certification test. When you see the 2 pink rollers, you are on the dual roller, right? If we see 1 red line, we are on overwrite trim. If we see 1 yellow line, we are on ripple trim. And also it's concerned with sides too. So this is an overwrite trim on the A side because I'm on the left side. This is my outgoing. So this is an overwrite trim on the A side. This is a ripple trim on the A side. This is a ripple trim on the B side. This is an overwrite trim on the B side. And this is a dual roller trim. Again, that pink is a dual roller trim. Very, very simple. So were you able to identify the different numbers as I was talking about them? I hope so. If you missed any, don't worry. We're going to keep working with them as we go forward. Let's repeat the same self-test on the keyboard though. So we're going to look at the following image and we're going to go through that. Okay, so this is hilarious to me. We have replace with replace shot results and step out button called out. This text is inside the book. Media Composer does not have their stuff together. because this is the book. This is the 2022, 2023 version of the book that's directly off their website, and it's got text over their images, like editor's notes. And this isn't the first editor's notes that I found across the book. Also, in the lessons, if you do the lesson reviews, sometimes the questions at the end of the knowledge checks are wrong. The answer sheet is wrong. Those aren't the correct answers. So you gotta be finding the truth for yourself, because Media Composer doesn't have their stuff together. But let's refer to this this keyboard, ignoring the text on the screen. Can you guess this number 1? What does 1 mean? So 1 is go to previous trim and go to next trim. Again, this jumps the position indicator to the previous or the next edit points in the active trim mode. So with our trim mode activated, and it is activated because I got one on, if I use ANS, we're going to see that jump all around to those edit points. Very nice. Pull that image back up. Number 2. What is number 2? Trim mode toggle, right? Jumps the position indicator to the nearest edit point and activates trim mode. We press it again, we'll exit trim mode, and we'll go back to source record mode. Number 3. What does number 3 do? Our P, left bracket, right bracket. We just talked about this. P activates the A side, which is the outgoing left side. Left bracket activates both sides, and the right bracket activates the B side, the incoming. All right, and then number 4, again, we just talked about this. These are our trim keys. These perform trims. This is our left or right arrow trims that go 1 frame at a time, and our double arrow trims on left or right, doing the 1/3 a second increments. Again, 1 and then 8 or 8 to 10 frames at a time. I hope you were able to identify these, especially because I've already talked about them twice this lesson. This is the 3rd time, I think. So get this stuff into your head and be using these features, because they're super powerful and they really, really help when you're refining that sequence. Again, when I'm using I'm using my keys here, I'm just going 1 frame at a time, and you're really going to get really precise with it. And that's super helpful when you're working in your projects. All right, executing the radio edit. As mentioned, you'll focus on a sequence's audio during the first pass through of a rough cut. During this radio edit, you'll work from the beginning of a sequence to the end, and you'll be going edit by edit to clean up the audio and adjust each cut's pacing to establish an overall rhythm for the scene. And you'll perform ripple trims to accomplish this. Remember, even though you'll focus on audio, you'll activate all video and audio tracks you need to keep in sync. So even though we're focusing on audio and we're going through and we're adjusting the way things sound, we're going to make sure that our link selection toggle is on. So when I come down here, I'm like, this needs to be over here. The same thing's happening in my video as well. Cool. Let's step through the workflow and explore the tools you'll use to do this efficiently. Excuse me. As you work through the steps, remember to focus on listening for the audio issues or opportunities to improve pacing and overall rhythm. All right, number 1, select the edit and enter trim mode. So during this step, you'll locate the edit point to adjust. For example, the first cut, you'll enter trim mode and select the appropriate tracks to maintain sync. So we're going to make sure we come through here like, yes, we want to edit on our V1 or A1. We're going to figure out which specific clip needs audio adjustment, whatever that may be. We'll enter trim mode by hitting U. Cool. Or we could be using our smart tool or a trim type tool, and we could be selecting our edits this way or however it may need to go. All right, during this step, you'll again locate the edit point. As mentioned, you can press the U key, like I said, or we can use the A and S keys to go to previous and next edits. If you do it really fast, it glitches out. And then if you tend to forget to check the track selectors, consider lassoing the edit. This can also help. So if we lassoed the edit, it would be the ones that we lassoed, and those would be the ones we were actually adjusting as we did that. Okay. As you can see on my screen here, Media Composer activates any tracks that we surround completely with our lasso. I'm not going to do that, but you can see it on my screen here, that I do have an edit point selected. To preview the edit, we can, to establish which side of the trim and by how much we want to edit, we can preview the edit. You can also use the playback loop button, which is number 6, or the space bar. This is the 5 key or the space bar. What if you're not sure which side contains the issue, though? So let's say we were jumping through this and we didn't know which side where the problem was. For instance, let's say there was a pop or some kind of partial breath. What we could do is we could use Media Composer to preview either side independently to analyze the audio at the cut point. In the trim mode, we could click the playback loop button 5 or spacebar key, and as playback loops, we can do the following. So while it's playing, where it's playing over and over and over again, we can press Q, which is go to in, to play the A side of the cut point to the outgoing left side. Or we can press W, go to out, to play the B side of the cut point. So again, let's say these two were having a conversation, and between these two cuts, this one and this one, somebody they breathed in, and I'm trying to figure out which one it is. I'm going to hit spacebar or 5 on my keyboard to hit that playback loop. It's going to keep playing over and over again. I could also hit it here. It's going to keep playing it over and over again, and I could be using the Q and W keys to pick which side I'm actually listening to. We could press either key a second time to return to looping both sides. So if I tap Q once, it's going to play that A side only over and over and over again until we hit that edit. And if I tap it again, it'll return back to playing both sides. And then we could click the playback loop button again to pause or playback, or spacebar. So we could keep doing that. And then we could select the side. Since we'll use the ripple trim to fix the issue or adjust pacing during the radio edit, you have a 50-50% chance of choosing the right side. You increase your chances of selecting the correct side if you analyze audio at the cut point as outlined above. So if we can speed up our process if we can actually figure out what we're listening to. When selecting a side, keep the following in mind. A side, which we'll click to the left, we can click the left monitor if we want to select the A side. So now I can just click my left monitor, and that's going to switch to my ripple trim on the A side. Or we can press P, that's going to switch it to my left side to prepare to fix the audio issue on the outgoing shot or adjust how quickly we can cut away from that clip. So that's all A side. And then B side, we can click the right monitor, that's going to switch sides, it's going to go to that side, or we could hit the right bracket, that's going to do the same exact thing. Cool. Once we select the side you're one decision away from performing the trim. Keep in mind, this takes much longer to explain than to execute, and with practice, you can make these decisions quickly, almost automatically. All right, number 4, we're going to determine the direction and perform the trim. A common reason creatives find trimming doesn't work as expected is they assume plus and minus means addition and subtraction. In Media Composer, plus and minus equals direction. Understanding this key is the key to successful trimming. That is technically anyway. So don't confuse your plus and minus. Those are just directions. And Media Composer is going to ask that question. It might ask it on your certification exam. So keep that in mind. Again, plus and minus, those are just direction to Avid Media Composer. All right. 2 visuals that can help you choose the correct direction when you are doing that trim, though, and which way you should drag the trim roller in a timeline to complete the trim, left or right. Essentially, let's say I grab this, right? We're set up right now for our trim. If I click and drag this way, we can see this over here, this left bracket thing appears, and that tells me how far I can actually trim this back before I hit the beginning handle of the shot. Transversely, we can see over here on the right, I have this right bracket. That tells me how long I have till I reach the end of this shot. And if you're not sure what's happening or what's going on, when I'm doing this trim, all I'm adjusting is this A side. We can see the B side is not doing anything. We just see my characters dancing here on my A side. So I'm doing with the yellow ripple trim, and I'm just adjusting this left side only. So as he's coming up, I believe what I did here was I had him come down. What does he do? He's supposed to spring up. Or no, he hands her, I think, a wallet or a photograph. And that's where I had this originally end. So what I'll do is he says something along the lines of keeping the tooth fairy busy because he's noticed a picture of like kids in her wallet. He's being a creep. So I'm going to cut it as soon as she has it in her hand because we can see she has it in her hand in the next shot. And so if I come through here now, if I come back through, he hands her phone, and then the next shot, where'd it go? It's there for a second. We can see it on her shoulder there for a second. So what I could do now is I could come to the second shot, and I could say, okay, well, I need a little bit more at the beginning here. We can see her take the phone from him. So now I got a little bit better here. So he hands it to her, she picks it up, and she takes it and puts it in her bag. So now we're making those small adjustments. Additionally, what I could do is I could just select here, and I could use my M and my period and comma and / keys, and I could be adjusting the precise frame rather than drag editing with my mouse. But you have options when you're doing this. Cool. If you load the clip in the source monitor to re-edit it, would you move the in or the out earlier? So let's say you're confused as to which direction this actually needs to go. So for instance, we're not sure, do I need to drag this clip left or right? I could right click this clip. I could do, where is it? I could have the clip, could have the position indicator over this clip, make sure I have my V2 track selected, and then I could do find bin. That's going to show where this is. That shows the sequences, excuse me. We could do match frame. No, that there. Now when I hit the match frame, it pulls it up into the source monitor. And if I need to figure out if I need to move the in mark or out mark on this clip, that can help me decide which direction I actually need this edit to go. Media Composer tries to explain this, but I feel like this is very self-explanatory. If you're working in your timeline, you're gonna understand typically what needs to happen, and you can always undo. This is a huge thing too, is if I go along and I'm like, oh, I think this needs to be drug out a little bit more, and I'm wrong, I can just hit Command Z. I can undo anything I need to. So maybe I don't need, maybe I need less time on this shot, and that's what I actually needed. Just remember, Command Z, Control Z, that's your best friend. Yeah. Cool. Let's keep moving though. Quick note though, before we move on, as you're trimming, you could be activating the toggle digital audio scrub button here, and then as I trim, we can listen. They say stuff, so we can hear some of what they're saying. So you can be using the toggling on and off the digital audio scrub to influence your decision when editing. Now, obviously, this section we're supposed to be using purely audio to edit. Again, beyond the little skips and blips that I can hear with the digital audio scrub, I can't properly play this back while recording. So I'm gonna just have to make do. But again, yeah, just try to be editing. Try to edit with that audio, because that's kind of the whole point of this lesson. Cool. All right, let's keep moving. All right. Quick note from Avid: if you're listening for an audio cue such as the beginning or end of a word, consider soloing the audio track. Remember, we have the option to solo this. So let's say we had our music track and it was distracting while we were trying to find our audio cues. We have that as an option. Additionally, if there's a long pause or a quiet moment, we could, if our track selector panel, our track control panel isn't expanded already, we could expand it, and we could click the waveform button. So let's say there was a specific word or moment we were looking for, we could use that waveform as oh, there's when he says stop really loud or something along those lines. So yeah, you would be using both those features to assist you in your editing. All right, method 2, we have numeric entry. So at times you may want to enter a precise trim value. This is common when working alongside a director or timing a program segment for commercial breaks, or finalizing an ad promo for a specific duration. You have to be frame perfect with that stuff. So once you've entered trim mode and you select the side you want to trim, we're selected already. I hate that it does that. We're selected already on our left side here. We can use the numeric keypad to perform the trim. So we can press the plus button or key and then type the number of frames from 1 to 99 to ripple forward to the right, and then press enter to execute that trim. Transversely, we could do the same thing. We could press the minus key and then type this number of frames, the desired number of frames from 1 to 99 to ripple back and to the left, and then press enter to execute that trim. We could type a number larger than 99 to enter a timecode value. For example, to trim by 1 second and 2 frames, we could type 102, and that would do the same thing. To add lowercase f after values greater than 99 to trim by a frame count instead of a timecode. For example, if we enter 200 frames, we would type 200f and then press enter. So if we wanted to do numbers larger than 1 to 99, we got to add that f at the end too. So keep all that in mind as you're doing this. Awesome. And then using the first two methods we just talked about can help you better understand the trim directions. And that's directions as in the direction in which the trim is occurring, right? Okay, so let's move to the final method. This final method hands you to the go-to trim tool for professional editors, and the one that they use most often. So let's explore why and how. So method 3 is JKL trimming. This method lets you trim dynamically and connect with the scene in an unparalleled way. You can unroll and roll up footage in real time, faster than real time, and slower than real time, or frame by frame with just 3 keys, and that is the JKL keys. And it provides smooth analog, audio, and video monitoring. So, have you been using the JKL keys to preview clips and sequences? If so, that's wonderful. You should be using them when you're previewing clips in your source monitor and really other places as well, but it works the same way when we're trimming, only Media Composer performs the trim as we're using the keys. So as we're playing in real time or whatever we're doing, one frame at a time or slower than real time, it's going to be doing those trims. So once we enter trim mode, if I hit U and we're already exited, now we're in trim mode. We can select a side and then determine the direction that we're ready to trim dynamically in. So let's select the B side. So I'll hit the right bracket, and that's going to go to the B side, the outgoing or the incoming side of my B shot. And then to trim forward or to the right at normal speed in our project with our project frame rate, we can press the L key once and then press the K key to stop.
You're not running out on me, are you?
And I could hit K, and that has performed that trim exactly that duration. Now we see we moved 54 frames to the right. Okay. If we want to trim forward at 1/4 speed, we can hold the K key and the L key. So if I hold K and L, now we're trimming at 1/4 speed forward. Awesome. To trim back and to the left at normal speed, we could, in our project, we could press the J key once and then press the K key to stop. So if I trim too much, and I think I have, I could hit J. And I could hit K to pause, and it's going to do that trim in reverse. So now we can see we've subtracted 35 frames. We've gone back even farther. If we want to do it at 1/4 speed, same thing. We can hold K and J at the same time. And now that's going back at 1/4 speed. Interesting. And then to trim forward or backward 1 frame at a time, we can press the K key as you quickly tap either the L or J key. If I hold K and I tap L, we could just be playing it 1 frame at a time. Cool. Quick note here from Avid, JKL trim will never completely trim away a shot. It will stop when 1 frame of the clip remains. If you trim away too much material, just reverse your duration and add more to the shot back in. So if I accidentally go too far...
You're not running out on me, are you?
All I have to do is stop, and I can hit J and go right back. And boom, get exactly where I need to. And again, this is putting us directly in the scene, and I love how this feature actually works when I am recording, so that makes it easy to preview it for you guys. You can trim at faster speeds by pressing J or L multiple times. This works great if you need to trim a super long section of a clip. So I could spam L right now. It's going to go really fast. And we lose the audio at one point, but we get essentially Alvin and the Chipmunks from that. Let me back it up there really quickly here, so I have more to work with. Okay. You could also use the JKL to experiment with edits directly in the timeline. For example, we could unroll footage to reveal additional content, a longer interview response, or an actor's dialogue leading up to a cut, and then trim the opposite direction to roll up what we don't need. JKL is versatile, and with practice may become your go-to trim tool of them all. And I really enjoy using JKL, and again, professional editors use this a lot because it doesn't take you out of the scene. You don't have to edit quietly and perform your trims with the M and period and comma keys. We can be listening to the scene while we're working with it.
Sorry, I was just
Wow.
Make sense? Cool. I hope that makes sense to you. All right, more notes. Technique tip, trimming on the fly. Once you feel comfortable with the trimming workflow, you may want to explore the trim method, especially you might want to explore this trim method, especially if you'd like to trim during playback. To trim during playback, we can enter trim mode, select tracks, and select the side we'll trim. Optionally, we could increase the pre-roll and post-roll values. We can loop playback with the spacebar and 5 key. And then during the playback loop, we could press the mark in or out key on our keyboard. That's I or O or E or R. Those are all default mapped to trim to that mark. This system trims the edit point to the mark and continues the playback loop, so you can review your edit and make further adjustments as you go. You can use the trim keys to finesse the trim during loop playback, and we can always be working to improve our scene and our sequence. Fun stuff. All right, let's move on now to maintaining sync. Maintaining sync is not a new topic. We've talked about this a lot throughout all of MC101 and all of MC110 now. And you strive to maintain sync during several exercises that you've hopefully completed while you're doing these courses, and hopefully doing that with success. At some point, everything inadvertently breaks sync, so at some point, everyone is going to mess this up. So the key is to recognize why and how to fix it. So this section reviews common ways that you might break sync, and more importantly, it covers how to maintain sync while trimming and how to fix broken sync. So ways to break sync, we know trimming only one side of a transition without selecting all necessary tracks. That's going to break sync. Extracting frames from only the video or audio track, not selecting both, not having our link selection toggle on or our sync locks, that can break our sync. Splicing in only audio or video. So if I added only video, that could throw off my sync, or only audio. And then moving only a synced audio or video segment with a segment mode tool. That can also break sync. So if I'm scrubbing through my timeline, I accidentally grab something, boom, and I chuck it somewhere else without my sync locks or correct track selected, that's also obviously going to break sync. Ways that you can prevent sync. You can always use either the dual roller or overwrite trim when trimming a single track. That's a good tip. Using the lift or overwrite instead of the extract and splice in when adding or removing content from only one track. That's a super easy way to keep sync. And then working with sync locks turned on is another option. Since this is the trimming lesson, let's take a closer look at how to maintain sync while we're trimming. So moving on, Avid thinks that using filler to maintain sync is the best place to go now. So as mentioned, you can maintain sync by using dual roller or overwrite trim on a single track. We'll explore more about that in upcoming sections. But let's look at how to use filler to maintain sync for now. You can use the overwrite trim on either video or audio tracks. This works particularly well with audio. For example, if a pacing adjustment introduces unwanted sound. If you use the overwrite trim on video, you will end up needing to replace that filler that's created with a new video clip. So audio is a good place because it's essentially hidden. To perform an overwrite trim with the keyboard, we can enter trim mode by hitting U on our keyboard, selecting which side we want to make the adjustment to, either the A or B side. And then by default, if we hit Shift plus D on our keyboard, this will activate the overwrite trim function if by default it's set to the ripple trim for you for some reason. And then we can use our favorite trim method. This could be JKL, this could be a numeric entry, or this could be the trim keys, M, comma, period, and slash. I'm going to use JKL for now, so I'm going to hit L on my keyboard.
You're not running out on me, are you?
I'm going to pause there just for fun. As you can see on my screen, we used the upright trim to remove unwanted noise, or we could have used it to remove unwanted noise. I just did an overwrite trim. Let's undo that. Let's select only our audio. So let's go down here, and this time I'm going to go backwards instead. And I could hit J on my keyboard. And it's revealing audio. But let's say I didn't need this audio at all. I don't need the sound of her walking across the room. I could just hit L a few times and essentially remove it all entirely. And it's really that easy. If I just wanted to take audio out of my project, I could be using the overwrite trim and just moving things around or removing them if I wanted to. So yeah, pretty much simple. Now that you have the tools to maintain sync, let's look at how you can use the tools to fix broken sync, and that's recognizing and repairing broken sync. Media Composer doesn't display sync breaks if the audio and video tracks come from different sources. So if I had the same video for some reason, if I had 3-3 and 3-3, but they were both from different sources for some reason, it wouldn't tell me that that sync was broken. Any function that can get you out of sync can get you back into sync, but trim mode, specifically the ripple trim, offers a simple way to review the edits and restore sync. That's because reviewing white numbers or looking at them doesn't necessarily restore the original edit. In trim mode, you can restore sync by performing one or more ripple trims on the out of sync tracks. To reverse the sync break, you'll add or remove the exact number of frames displayed in the timeline. So let me show you how to do that now. So to fix broken sync in trim mode, let's first break sync here, and we could do that by ripple trimming just this shot. And now we can see we are offset by 86 frames. So now that we're offset by our 86 frames, we can select the track that's out of sync, select, and then that caused the issue, otherwise we can the video. And then we can activate the B side of the incoming, so we've got that activated already. And then we can use the numeric entry to type the opposite number displayed. For some reason, I can't get this to work today. I think that this might have to do with the fact that I don't have an extended keyboard with that extra set of numbers. But if you did have that option, you could hit the minus key or the plus key, and then we could do the opposite number indicated to fix our sync. So we have 86 right now, so we'd probably want to do a plus 86 so that we could maintain, so we could add those 86 frames back and then fix our broken sync here. All right. If the out of sync value increases, simply trim the opposite direction. So if, let's say, you did try to fix this by adding 86 and it went the wrong way, you could subtract 86 and just play with it. You're going to mess up inevitably, but the first couple times you do it, you're eventually going to figure it out. All right, maintaining sync on multiple tracks. As your sequence grows in complexity with more audio and video tracks, you can use filler to trim tracks without clips. To do this, we can add edit points to cut the filler into line with the edit point you need to trim. This maintains an easy trim setup so you won't throw away any downstream material out of sync. To maintain sync on multiple tracks, we can enter the trim mode at the edit point that we want to trim. Alt or Option click on Mac to the edit point button in the timeline palette, or the key that we've mapped, and then we can use our favorite method to perform the trim on all tracks, yada yada yada. And if you don't hold the modifier key as you click, Media Composer adds the edit point to any active tracks anyway. So what did I just say there? What is Avid Media Composer saying? Essentially what it's saying is if we have tracks here, one of the things that we can do to keep maintaining sync is we could be adding edit points. So we could be selecting multiple tracks and adding edit points. When we add those edit points, these edit points are going to appear here in our filler. So when we go to do a trim, everything's going to trim with it. Or in essence, if I trim this, if I select all my tracks again and I go to trim something, now we can see that it's trimming all these tracks at the same time, and that's going to help maintain sync because we can have these edit points as anchors for future reference. And also for future reference, you're probably going to want to be using the ripple trim because that's what's really going to help you maintain sync here. As that content, we can see even these add edited points or these add edit points are moving downstream. So we are able to maintain sync by having it all selected at the same time. Awesome. If you break sync during the exercise, now you know how to fix it. So let's return to the trim workflow and look at how to create split edits now. So creating split edits. As you adjust pace and rhythm with the ripple trim, you'll no doubt create some awkward visual transitions such as mismatched actions or interrupted reaction shots. Plus, if the video and audio always change at the same time, the edits may become obvious to the viewer. What is the fix for this? Well, the fix for this is split edits. This just means that the video and the audio cut at different times. This creates for something more interesting and visually appealing to look at and less boring. If we're consistent, if every single cut is just a straight cut. It's going to be uninteresting to look at. So we want to make it interesting. We want to keep people's attention. That's the point of this visual medium. So split edits are also commonly referred to as L cuts or J cuts. If you're one of my students, you know we've been talking about L cuts and J cuts since literally week 1 of this class. To create a split edit, you'll perform a dual roller trim or extend edit on a single track, essentially adjusting a cut point's timing while maintaining sync. This can solve visual mismatch problems while leaving the radio edit intact, and effectively interweaves the audio and video into a cohesive whole. So when we're doing this, we're adjusting. Oh, let me undo that. We're only adjusting. Essentially, we're adjusting one thing. So if I slide this over now, we've got the audio from this clip starts playing before we even see it cut to that point. I wish I could demonstrate this to you, but I really can't because the audio doesn't properly play back. But we'll do our best as we keep moving. All right, whether you use the dual roller trim or the extend edit to create split edits, you'll follow the same workflow as we outlined at the beginning of this lesson. And let's look at how that is. So we'll use the dual roller trim to create split edits. As you may recall, the dual roller trim does affect both sides of an edit point by adding frames to one clip and subtracting frames, the same number of frames from the adjacent clip. So no matter which direction we're going, if we're using a dual roller trim, it's adding or subtracting from either side. We can see both my A and my B side, they're moving because it's being affected on both sides. Cool. Where were we? This makes selecting a side easy, so you'll select both. So you don't have to worry about which side you're selecting. To create a split edit with the dual roller trim, we're going to turn off the link selection toggle in our timeline palette. So this is almost always enabled, so you can disable this now, so it's gray. Once it's gray, you have the ability to select specific points, because if this is selected and I select one of these, it's going to select both the linked video and audio together. So we don't want that to happen. When we're creating our split edits, or our J cuts or L cuts, we're going to want to select just the video or just the audio. We can really slide whichever one we like. Cool. So we'll enter the trim mode on our desired track. We'll determine the direction that we're going to perform the trim. With our favorite method, we're going to then do the trim. So we can use JKL, for example. We could use the M, comma, period, or slash key, numeric entry, or we could click and drag the timeline. I'm going to use the J key here. Now, if we come back through here, and I can't play it, unfortunately. I wish I could. It's working. Oh yeah, it's probably not a good place, a good example, but I can't believe it's working. The video that it's playing now. What the heck? Okay, I'm happy. Okay, cool. So that's great. So essentially what we did, and we can see this here now, is that the audio from this shot is extended, and then the cut happens, but we can still hear the audio from the previous shot. This is called an L cut, because it's in the shape of an L. Transversely, if we had taken this audio and we had drug it the opposite direction, now we have the audio from the next shot starts playing here before the cut occurs. This is called a J cut because it's in the shape of the letter J. So it's really that simple to remember. It's really that easy to remember that the L cut is shaped like an L. We have our video cut, but the audio continues. Our J cut, our audio from the next clip seeps in, and then the cut occurs. So we have a J, right? It bends in the opposite direction. Cool. All right. So that's a simple overview of what a J cut and an L cut is. It's much more visually interesting when you have an instance of like a guy's like, "Hey, Billy Bob," and we're still on one shot, but then the next shot is the guy saying, "Hey, Billy Bob," but originally we were looking at someone else. So it's kind of, you'll see this in movies where it'll be like, I don't know, it'll be like Spider-Man, and we'll still be looking at Spider-Man, but we'll hear someone yell Spider-Man, and then it'll cut to the person. We'll see the person yelling Spider-Man, and it's a little boy about to get flattened by a bus. So all kinds of options when we're creating film and adding tension. So as you trim, the trim counters display the number of frames being trimmed from the transitions outgoing and incoming sides. For example, what do you think -4 on the counter indicates? Obviously, that's subtracting 4 frames from whichever side we are moving from. So it's taking 4 frames off essentially. So if I did my dual roller trim here and I move it this way, when we're doing minus, it means we're subtracting, we're making this shot shorter while the other shot is becoming longer. If I went the other direction, we'd see it go positive, so we'd see 72. Pretty straightforward stuff. You can easily remove split edits using the dual roller trim. So we could set up the dual roller trim on a cut point that we want to move, and then we can control drag or command drag the trim rollers to the location of the other cut. So if I wanted to fix this, so right now we have our audio is out of sync, right? It's not out of sync, it's just not lined up with where it should be in quotes. So if I hold command, it's going to snap back. Now you can let go, and this is essentially the way that we started. It's got our cut point, and they're all lined up. Everything has been realigned to where it quote unquote should be. All right, let's move on now to using extend to create the split edit. So the extend function works well if you know where you want the split edit to begin or end. When you enter trim mode, the position indicator always jumps to the edit point. Since we're using the extend function, we can bypass the trim mode so that we don't lose our place. So again, using the extend function, we know exactly where we want this cut to occur. If we're trying to make a split edit, we got to make sure we're selected only on one track, whether that be audio or video, because what we're trying to do is essentially move this edit point to the left or to the right. So to determine the direction, we could mark in to move the next cut back in the position to the position indicator. So, or we could hit mark out to move the previous cut forward to the position indicator. So if I wanted the next shot to cut sooner, I would set an in mark over here, and if I wanted this cut to occur later, I would set an out mark over here. So I'm going to hit out on my keyboard, and then all I have to do is hit the extend button that I've mapped, and with my correct V1 track selected, I hit extend, and that's going to move that edit point over here, and now we've created a split edit. Now what kind of edit is this? We just talked about this. We have the audio, it's extending before this shot cuts. So what is this shaped like? That's right, shaped like a J. So this is a J cut. So that's a quick way to do a J cut if you want to use the extend function. Let me undo this, and I'm going to clear my marks. What if you don't have your extend button mapped to your command palette? Because Avid Media Composer left you high and dry, I'm going to teach you Command 3 on your keyboard. You're going to come over to Edit, and then in Edit, you can find the extend function. Where's extend? It should be in here. Oh, it's in trim, isn't it? Yep, it's in trim. So here's the extend button, and then making sure you're mapped button-to-button reassignment. You can just drag and then drop this on your palette to the place that you want it. So, all right, quick bonus tip there. All right, let's keep moving. Quick thing to note here: if you're going to keep doing and if you're going to keep creating split edits with the extend function, make sure you're hitting G on your keyboard, because if I have like residual stuff left over and I hit the extend function, I'm going to accidentally make mistakes, and I'm going to be trimming my timeline in ways that I don't want. So again, G on your keyboard, as in good boy. G is going to undo those marks. Let's move on now to trimming split edits. So good news, to refine a cut with split edits, you don't need to re-edit that section or remove the split edits. Instead, you can use your favorite trim method to carefully make the necessary adjustment. And if you properly include both audio and video, everything will stay in sync. So let's get into how to do that. So to trim a split edit, do one of the following. We can activate V and A selectors, our video and our audio track selectors, to stay in sync and enter trim mode using the U key, or we could just select an edit. So let me make a quick split edit. So now we have wow, look, beautiful split edit. We can see it's a split edit. What kind of edit is this? Audio continues, right? But we have the audio from last shot. What am I looking at? Well, we have a J cut because audio comes from the previous shot and then continues. Okay, but what if I want to trim it? I'm going to move this position indicator, making sure that the correct tracks are selected. So I've got to make sure my V1 and my A1 tracks are selected. I could lasso these. That's dumb. I'm going to hit U on my keyboard, and that's going to snap to just this one. But if we select our second one, that's also going to activate our other. And even though we're set up that these appear to be out of sync. They are in sync, and I can trim these at the same time with my JKL keys, my trim mode keys, whatever I want, and it's gonna do the exact same thing at both points. So I could be fine tuning my split edits here. It's very fun. So as you can see on my screen, trimming the split edit is simple. Just pay close attention to the track selectors so we can maintain sync. If we're not maintaining sync, we're ruining everything. Transversely, we could use the we could switch to, let's say, was it Shift D or is it Shift J? Oh, nope, that's not it. Anyway, right now we're set to dual roller trim. You could set it to something else. You could do the overwrite or the ripple trim if you wanted to. All right, let's change the center of the playback loop, though. So what if I have my playback loop, but let's set up an example here properly. Let's say I had a split edit, but it was really, really, really far apart. That's not quite as far as I need it to be. Let's try something else. Let's say I had a split edit here. Well, I can't do it any farther than that is. Let's try and move this. No, I can't. I'm stuck. Help. Help, filler. Let's try. No. We're stranded. We don't have enough content to make this. I'll just pretend. We'll just play pretend. So I'm going to select this track as well. Let's say that my split edit was really, really far apart. So for instance, I had that audio transition, but we still had the previous shot, but the cut occurred way farther down timeline. Like this was still here, but this video cut was way down here. If I hit my playback loop, it's only going to cover this front section. It might cover some of it. Well, we can move the center of our playback loop so it would include both this and that if this was way down here. I hope that makes sense. So when you activate the tracks for trimming a split edit, Media Composer parks the position indicator at the video cut. Not a problem unless we're trying the audio or video falls outside of the playback loop. So again, if they're too far apart, we might not be able to see that. You can fix this by changing the center loop playback, also known as the watch point. To do this, we can click directly on another track's trim roller, and then we can when you click and make sure your cursor icon matches the current roller configuration, either the A side or the B side. If not, the trim rollers will swap positions and whatever. What I'm essentially saying is that if it's selected like this, if it's currently selected like this, and we can see the position indicators there, and we're trying to do our playback loop with a 5 key. We're doing a quick playback loop here. Ours fits within, but it would be nice if we could just click. We could click up here. Oh my gosh, everything's breaking. All right, we could click it that way. But what if you need to remove the split edit? You can either use the dual roller trim or extend edit to accomplish this. The dual roller trim is probably the fastest way, and it involves less steps because we could simply click the dual roller and deselect this track, and then we could hold command, and it's going to snap back to where it was. So now, again, essentially these shots are a straight cut. It's a straight match cut. Not a match cut, but a straight cut. Bing, bam, boom. But if we want to remove a split edit, I already talked about doing this. Interesting. I wonder why Media Composer is trying to tell you to do this again. Yeah, and I don't need to do that, so we're good. We've already fixed that. All right, with that, we've covered 2 trim passes, the radio edit and split edits. Now let's look at a third trim pass called the slip and slide. And this is where things get extremely fancy, so buckle up, kids. Slipping and sliding segments. In this section, you'll explore how to refine cutaways to create perfect timing and content. For this, you'll use slip and slide. If you're moving to Media Composer from another NLE, this function may seem familiar. That's because Avid's name for these functions has remained consistent in other apps that have adopted these features. So we've got, Premiere Pro and other programs, they're adopting the same name conventions because Avid Media Composer is the one paving the way. We include the slip and slide in this lesson because they are trims, they're technically trims, a form of dual roller trim actually. So let's look at how they work. So first we have slipping a shot. What if content included in your cutaway or reaction shot doesn't work? So let's make a reaction shot. Let's get a reaction shot. I like this. This looks like a reaction shot. Let's right click this. We'll do a quick Where's the button? Why isn't it showing up? Never mind. I know where this is. If we go to video, this is 3v3. I could find a shot that looks like a reaction shot. So somewhere he's like, oh, wow. All right. So we got this nerd. So do it right before he picks his head up. I'll set an in here. And I'll set an out as he's smiling. And then once his smile goes away, I'll set an out. Okay, cool. So now I've got my in, my out. I'm going to come up here to my V2 track. And transversely, I could just drag and drop. And now I got my V2 track. I'm also going to set this to A2. So now I'm importing the, well, I don't need the audio. I'll just add a reaction shot. So she's saying, blah, 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 blah. Let's imagine that she says something like, oh, you're so cute. Wow, I love your hair. We could add a quick reaction shot here. So now I'm set to my V2. I'm just going to hit B on my keyboard to overwrite that. Now I'm going to add that edit. So now we can see this lovely cutaway shot. So she's like, she's here and she's like, oh, wow, you're so handsome. And then he's like, oh, thanks. And then he's blushing. But now we have a reaction shot. So what if we want to slip our reaction shot because it's not quite perfect? So when performing a slip media composer, we place the roller on either side of the segment you're slipping. One edit unrolls the frames while the other rolls up the same number of frames from the opposite side. That means the shot's content changes while the duration and position stays the same. What the heck does that mean? So this saves time, but essentially, and I love saying essentially because they say that a lot. I feel like mumbo jumbo on YouTube. It's really quite simple. We've got one roller over here and one roller over here. This thick boy in the timeline is going to stay just as thick. It's not going to squish. It's not going to extend. But the content is going to roll. The content that's inside this is going to roll. So if I use my M key here, we can see that the shot's location and its width are staying the same. But I'm going back and forth inside this, and I'm moving the actual content of this shot. I hope that makes sense. So now when I play through, it's almost different. It's not quite different, but it's almost different. You know what I'm trying to say. Okay, let's keep rolling off course with this. Off script, I should say, not off course. The way to activate your slip edit is you're always going to drag from left to right. I think I said that before, but I'm going to say it again. Now, like I said earlier, we're changing the content of this. We're not changing its location. We're not changing its position. We're changing the content that's actually within the shot. So as I scrub it back and forth, we can see that the content is changing. Now, if you're confused as to what's happening up here in my screen, it's essentially showing us what the new first frame, the beginning frame of the split edit is, and what the new last frame of the split edit is. Or slip edit. It's not split edit. Excuse me. Slip edit. And you could be using any one of your favorite trim keys. You could use the J key, JKL keys. You could use your M period, comma keys, whatever your favorite is. You can use that as well with this function. And this had me confused for a while. But slip edits are really quite simple. They work and they just work. They work the way that they do. And so let's say I had a whole series of reaction shots. This is not a good example. I'd like to pull out or import some other footage for this example, but I think due to time constraints and your patience with me, I'm not going to do that. But we could really grab either side of this and continue to perform that slip edit. So again, we're changing the content of the shot. We're sliding around inside, but we're not moving its location and we're not adjusting its length or its time that it takes up. All right, sweet. I hope that all makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to shoot me an email if you need to. And I can explain this more, and I will explain this more when we are in class specifically. Okay. Anything else Avid wants to say about this? Well, lassoing the segment effect offers the advantage as it takes you directly to trim mode and then sets up for the slip and changes the active track selection to include only the segment we've lassoed. So lasso is a nice quick feature. Did you notice the 4-frame display in the image, or at least on screen when I was performing my edit? You can see this 4-frame display now. The 4-frame display, that appears automatically when you set up for the slip. The 2 middle images, again, update to show you the first and last frames of our slip while we're slipping the clip. And again, slip works great to get the perfect cutaway or reaction shots content. So you can also use this to make a perfect montage footage, get the perfect montage footage for content. In the Tennessee parkour montage we created during lesson 4. So we could go back and we can make those adjustments there. All right, now let's move into sliding a shot. That's different from slipping a shot. Slipping a shot is moving the content within the parameters that have already been set, not moving its location or anything. Let's talk about sliding a shot now, though. Okay, as mentioned, sliding adjusts a shot's position. Does this sound familiar? Because it should. You've used the lift and overwrite tool to adjust the clip's position in the timeline. This works great for audio, but not for video because it creates a filler gap. Slide does not make a filler gap. When sliding a shot, Media Composer places rollers on the tail frame of the segment before the segment you're sliding and the head frame of the segment after the shot that you are sliding. These two rollers work in tandem, unrolling and rolling up the same number of frames to move the shot in either direction. What the heck does that mean? What the heck does that look like? Let's go through that now. To perform a slide, it's very similar to a slip, but to slide a shot, we're going to set up for the slide by doing the following. So let's do this. Let's hold our Shift and Option key, and then we're going to slide this shot. So we're going to select this content. I don't need that V2, so I'm going to deselect that because I'm going for this 3B-3, both audio and video. There are a few other ways that we could enter the setup for our slide. We could enter trim mode at the beginning or end of the shot that we want to slide, and then hold Alt or Option and double-click the segment trim roller. Additionally, we could enter trim mode at the beginning or end of the shot that we want to slide, and then shift-click the opposite end of the segment, or we could enter trim mode at the beginning of the shot, right-click the segment, and then choose Select Slide Trim. This is the easiest way to do it, to drag from right to left and hold Shift and Option, or I believe it's Shift and, Shift and Control? What is it? It's Shift on Windows. It's Shift Alt, Shift Alt on Windows. Okay, to move the clip earlier or to move it backward or forward, we can use our JKL keys. And we can see, whoa, look, it's moving its location in the timeline. But remember the first frame and our last frame? With the slip, that's what's changing. With this, it's the clips around it that are being affected, not the internal clip. We're just sliding this clip around in the timeline. And we can be precise with it if we're using our M, comma, period, and slash keys. So I could be moving this very slightly or in larger increments with my M, my period, my comma, and my slash key. So that's what slide is doing. Slide is actually sliding the shot around on our timeline. Slip is sliding the shot inside a region while the region stays fixed. I hope that clears things up for you. When you set up for a slide, Media Composer once again initiates the 4-frame display. Again, I just explained this. So sliding versus the segment editing. Remember, with segment editing, we're just essentially, if we were doing segment editing, I could just do the same thing, right? I could just pick this up. I could just be sliding this around. What's the difference between this and the slide function? Well, sliding versus segment editing. As mentioned, sliding a clip is similar, like I just said. Nudging or dragging clips with the lift and overwrite tool leaves gaps or filler in the sequence. Slide leaves no gap. So if I am moving these around, we can see we are leaving significant gaps in my timeline by doing it this way. If I use my slide, it's going to constantly be closing that gap. Sliding doesn't let you skip over clips to an entirely new location sequence, though. So that's the difference between slide and the segment mode. Segment mode, I could pick up this shot. I could pick up this whole shot with my yellow segment mode tool, and I could flip it over to other shots. Slide's going to Slide's going to keep it more contained. So let me try and do that now. Let me try and select the Shift Option. I'm going to slide select. I got my slide region selected, and when I perform my slide and I start moving this around, it's going to stop me. It's going to keep me in this rough area, but it won't let me go completely past or over. I'm going to undo that because that looked very confusing. But there you go. There's that for reference. Okay. And then you can't use the JKL with segment mode. So JKL editing is something we can do when we're doing the slide, but it's not something we can do when we're dragging these clips around arbitrarily. We can't hear or see what we're doing. It's just kind of almost blind luck when we're dragging this around and dropping it. So those are the major differences. Let's look one more let's look at one more consideration when slipping and sliding, and that's monitoring while slipping or sliding. English, Professor Harris, English, do you speak it? Did you notice the green lights under the trim counters when we start a slide? So let's activate that slide again. I'm going to do Shift, Option. I'm going to select this. And now we can see we got our counters here. They're doing their things. If I start sliding this around, we can see it's doing the same stuff it was doing earlier. Plus and minus numbers as we're performing our slides. So these lights, the green lights that appear underneath our little frame counters, the light appears under the left counter. You're monitoring the audio under the beginning of the segment you're slipping or sliding. If the light appears under the right counter, you're monitoring the audio under the end of the segment you're slipping or sliding. So it's telling us what we're looking at, what we're monitoring as these edits are being performed. So if I get over to the other side, let me get off. Anyway, to switch the monitor, just hover your cursor over either the second or third image or fourth image if we're performing our slip or slide. I like how, okay, hold on, we have this selected. I didn't mean to do that. There we go. Now I can hover over whichever monitor and we can see that's the one that we're listening to. That's the one we're monitoring as we're performing the slip or slide. I apologize for that. So now we've got that set up. By the way, hovering the cursor over the A side or B side image during the dual roller trim switches the audio monitoring as well. So if we were doing this with the dual roller trim, that would be doing the same thing. We can see those little green are popping up back and forth as I switch rapidly. If you're working on an external client monitor connected through the breakout box, you'll see the green light also controls which image appears on the client monitor during the dual roller trim, slip, or slide. So that's another thing for reference for external equipment. With that, you're ready to create some split edits and make further adjustments to the anesthesia project. That's more of an exercise thing, so go ahead and go complete that yourself. But with that, we've reached the end of this lesson. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. I respond to those there as well. I know this is a little bit different. I'm happy to go off script to explain it in a way that makes more sense to me because, again, the slip and slide functions were something I struggled with grasping, especially just reading the textbook. So I'm trying to give you guys the tools that I didn't have when I was studying for these Avid exams. Okay, again, we've reached the end of the lesson. Thank you guys so much for watching. To my students, I will see you in class, and to my YouTube watchers or viewers, like, comment, and subscribe. Bye-bye.